Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome on this rather grey Sunday afternoon, or at least it's grey in County Galway. Perhaps it's a little brighter where you are. But it's great to have you with us for the launch of two performances by Resurgam Connects. It's our second outing. We did a project earlier in the year, which I hope you heard and saw. So this is our second one of a virtual choir, rehearsing online, working on the music online, and then putting together online performances from individual recordings. In these days of lockdown, though obviously we're not quite as constrained as we were, the opportunity to perform together has been a lifeline, I think, for so many of us. It's given us the opportunity to keep singing together, even though it's been a little bit like doing some sort of bizarre nuclear experiment through those gloves. You know how people do it, where they don't actually sort of touch the material. So it's a little bit like that. And of course, with its limitations. But having said that, it has kept us together. We've been able to engage in new and exciting ways. And we've been able to make music, albeit in a rather different format than we would usually use. So I found it really thrilling to work with so many singers that we wouldn't normally have been able to work with in this way. And I think what we've been able to achieve has been absolutely terrific. So this afternoon, we're presenting for you two pieces. Again, something old, something new, not quite borrowed and blue, but new and old. So we've got a lovely 17th century piece by Heinrich Schütz, Cantate Domino, and we have a piece from our own time, Eoghan Desmond's This Is My Prayer. So we're going to start with Eoghan's piece. That's going to be the first piece that we'll hear and see this afternoon. And to introduce the piece, I'm going to ask Eoghan Kelly, who is a member of Resurgam and has been really the power behind these projects. He is the man who has put all the recordings together and done the editing, the audio editing and the visual editing to produce the final product. Most of us have no idea what's involved. It's a mystery, this art. And I think it would be great to explore that a little bit with Eoghan and without giving away too many secrets in terms of what he does, to find out a little bit more about it. So Eoghan, it's great to have you with us.
Thanks, Mark.
Perhaps you'd like to just give us a little bit of an insight into what you do, what the sort of process is from go to woe in very broad strokes.
For sure. Well, luckily, in Resurgam's case and Resurgam Connects case, we work with such talented musicians and experienced singers that I don't have to do quite as much as I might have to do on other recording projects. But essentially, with these, virtual choirs, there are many layers that we have to go through. Speaking about the Schütz piece, which we'll hear later on, you decided to work with ECSE and of course Siobhan on harp, which meant that we had this kind of, I guess, backing track to create initially, which is such a luxury for the singers to record over. It's worth remembering, of course, that all of the parts have been recorded individually and in each person's home. So it's not easy to just find your part and to sing an entire piece of music that you're used to singing with 30 or 40 people. It's not easy to sing that on your own. So with the Schütz, it was great to have that backing track there. But of course, it's not just that. We don't have the luxury of sitting in a room and rehearsing with our conductor and knowing exactly where the beat's going and getting used to breath marks and things like that. So we had to also create a click track, which is all the singers had a little beat going in their ears, just to keep everybody in time and make sure that the phrasing and the dynamics were consistent. So that's just the audio side of things. So we recorded the audio separately in some cases, and then put the video on top of that. And it's an arduous but enjoyable and enriching process for myself, putting all this sound together and gradually getting a sense of where it's going and how it's building up. And hopefully the end product is something close to what might be a live sound.
Sure. Interesting, Eoghan. We've all been thrilled with what you've done visually with these pieces. And of course, these performances where we have this online presentation opens up all sorts of opportunities that we wouldn't have if we were just performing them live in a venue. What was your inspiration there for some of the things you have done with the visuals, the colouring or the lack of colouring, the way the voices are grouped? Perhaps just tell us a little bit about your thoughts there.
I think over the last 18 months or so, there's been so many virtual choirs and so many ways to present the music online, but they've been done in a relatively basic way because essentially none of us have done this before. This is all new. So I really wanted to try and present something in the now what has become traditional virtual choir sense, but just add something a little bit more to it. Early music to the general audience is seen as something that's for only a specific niche or only for a certain type of musician or a certain type of audience, but it's much more than that. And I really wanted to, in the Monteverdi previously and now in the Schütz, I wanted to really highlight the fun aspects of the music and how the composers might have been thinking when they were creating these lovely dance figures within the music. So just add a little bit of colour and a little bit of extra taste to that was just, you know, behind the motivation there. Whereas with Eoghan's piece, Eoghan Desmond's piece, it was something a lot more contemporary. However, I wanted to bring that back, and I wanted to bring the focus to the text in the same way as I did with Sean Doherty's piece in our last project. It's wonderful text, and it's wonderfully chosen, and it's wonderfully illuminated by Eoghan's music. So I wanted to strip that back, take some of the colour out of it, or most of the colour out of it, and really bring the text to the fore.
Just talking about Eoghan's piece, you've sung in all of these pieces as a member of Resurgam. With Schütz and with Desmond, we've got two very different musical styles and obviously different requirements of technically and musically from the singers. Could you just give me your thoughts about how you've approached those differences, how you found it to sing those two contrasting pieces in the context of this project?
In the context of this project, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the Schütz, we had the luxury of singing over the wonderful band of English cornet and sackbut ensemble. It doesn't get much better than that, really, to sing alongside. So, firstly, there's no changes in meter. It's pretty direct and you can just really go for it in a way that you probably would in the live setting as well. It's not that there aren't nuances within it, but it's still very much a romp from start to finish, and I very much enjoyed that. With Eoghan's piece, it's probably a much more technically difficult piece to achieve, whether you're singing in an ensemble or on your own. I won't mind admitting that I probably took 2 or 3 takes to record it myself. Very long, expansive phrases, quite high tessitura for the tenors, thanks to Eoghan for that. And as I say about the text, trying to bring new ways, because it's in English, we obviously relate to our language maybe a little bit more immediately than we would to the Latin of the Schütz. Just making sure that the text comes through these long, expansive phrases. And I record the solo on top of it as well. So on one occasion, it's jumping from the tenor line to the solo line, which didn't actually work. So I ended up there's 2 versions of me on the recording eventually.
You're very good to admit to how many takes you had to make, because I think some of us, our best kept secrets are the days we have spent trying to get an acceptable take of something. The secrets of online life, shall we say. Kieran, that's fascinating. Thank you so much. It's great to get some insight into the process, but also insights from singing these 2 pieces. So I think without further ado, we'll launch our first performance this afternoon, which is Eoghan Desmond's setting of the Tagore text, "This is my prayer to thee."
This is my prayer to thee, my Lord. Strike, 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 the root of penury in my heart. Give me the strength, guide me to bear my joy.
soul and mind.
This is my prayer, my
That was This Is My Prayer to Thee, text by Rabindranath Tagore, set by Eoghan Desmond. And at this point, I'm going to bring Siobhan Armstrong into our discussion. Hi there, Siobhan.
Hi, Mark. It's lovely to join you. Hi, Kieran.
Very good to have you with us.
Oh, you're so welcome. That was such a striking piece. I'm just sitting here mesmerised. Can either of you tell me a little bit more about Eoghan Desmond and his composition?
Sure. Well, Eoghan is actually a member of Resurgam, and he was singing on that performance. So we should have had a little arrow pointing to him, perhaps. This is the composer. So he is a very fine singer, singing with Resurgam and with Chamber Choir Ireland, also a burgeoning career as a soloist. But he is steeped in the ecclesiastical tradition. He sung with the cathedral choirs in Dublin, so he understands how to set a sacred text, first of all, and to make maximum impact in a small space, just in the length of an anthem or a motet. That sort of compressed energy, he really captures that. And he knows how to write for a choir. He knows how to write for the voice as well.
Yeah, because it seemed very succinct, but very rich in a small scale, with incredibly beautiful text, very meaningful text. It was absolutely stunning. So thrilled to hear that. I suppose there's a natural affinity, maybe. I find it in some colleagues, those of us who play early music. Contemporary music really speaks to us as well. It's the bit in the middle we're not so great at,
I agree. There are real affinities there between early and late, I find. And in programming, it's really good to put early music and contemporary music together, because that compressed energy is something I think that they often share. And that's what we've done with these two projects, pairing an early piece with something.
Yeah, I think it's fabulous. There's a sort of freshness to both, because early music, of course, these are traditions that changed long ago, so they sound fresh to our ears when we hear these old instruments that haven't been heard in a long time, old textures, old musical forms, and then we hear this contemporary music. So I really applaud this programming where both go together. It's wonderful stuff.
Right. Well, speaking about instruments, Siobhan, something I wanted to ask you about. I can't remember, was it Handel or some famous composer on the tomb? It says organist and musician, which I've always sort of objected to a little bit. It's as if organists aren't musicians. And quite often people talk about singers in the same way. You'll have the singers in the choir, then you'll talk about the musicians in the orchestra. What we've been trying to do with Resurgam is break that barrier down, that the voices and the instruments are partners in this. Well,
of course, it's a completely artificial barrier, because in the 17th century you played instruments and you sang, and you danced. You knew how to dance a galliard, or you knew how to dance an allemande, and then you would play your instrument, you would sing, and everything influenced everything. It's this sort of these crazy binaries that we have now that are so artificial and don't help us to make music. I think I'm very influenced in my music making because I was a singer primarily. We always sang in cathedral choirs, and it's all about the text for me. I just happen to play a harp, but I'm really a singer who happens to play a harp, is the way I think of myself, rather than a harpist per se.
Yes.
That's also why I'm so delighted to be involved in these projects, because my whole musical life is kind of revolves around how do I get to accompany singers. That's what's of interest to me in so many ways, whether it's plain chant or opera or Schütz or Channo singing, whatever it is. I always want to be where there are singers. That's the interesting thing to me.
Schütz, when he, or at least the score as it's come down to us, he doesn't give us any indication as to whether instruments should play or not. It's just the 4 vocal parts. So, we are working within that principle of that we know that these composers had access to instruments as well as voices. They had them. Schütz and Dresden obviously had instrumentalists on his payroll as well as vocalists. So, we can make a pretty educated guess that instruments would have played.
And all around Europe, in ecclesiastical music, musicians played. Maybe the harp wasn't so used in the ecclesiastical context in Germany, but certainly in Spain and places like that. Mark, you and I at a cathedral would be colleagues, because you would have the cathedral organist and you would have the cathedral harpist, and they would be co-positions in any big church or cathedral in Spain. So the harp is used in ecclesiastical music in some places in Europe, if not all the time in Germany. But of course, Schütz travelled to Italy. He went over the Alps like everybody did to go and train. And so, of course, when he arrived in Venice and, in Italy, the instrument that you will hear me playing, that you will see me playing on this recording, the Italian arpa tripla or arpa doppia, was the instrument of the day there. So he would have been familiar with this instrument.
Exactly, yeah. How do you find playing vocal lines, as it were? What's the thing that you find interesting about sort of being in that context of playing with text, basically?
I suppose that the fun is to try to express the text in your instrument. So the whole reason that this instrument that I'm playing, the reason it was invented was for the seconda pratica, the new music that came into being around in the years after 1600, when the polyphonic lines that we still hear in this Schütz piece. This is a very polyphonic piece, but shortly music will change. Schütz, within his own lifetime, music changed quite considerably. So my instrument was invented to play text, to express the affects and the passions in music in the text. So whether I'm playing ecclesiastical music or more usually I'm playing secular vocal music on this instrument, I'm using it for Italian monody in opera and chamber music. And there, of course, you have the opportunity, because the instrument has a bass, a middle and a treble, and you can play it, very tenderly, or you can play it with some aggression or passion. So you can express all kinds of text. So that's the fun for me, is trying to sing the music in my fingers on my instrument.
Sure. And I think for the singers, it sort of works in the mirror image of that, for the singers to find that their line is being coloured by these instruments. So they, of course, have the text, but they have this wonderful colour coming from both the continuo and also the wind instrument.
Yeah, because I'm playing, you and I, Mark, are playing the continuo on the bottom on the organ and the harp, which is a very common, if not the harp, certainly the idea of a plucked instrument and the organo di legno, the chamber organ. I mean, Monteverdi, we've already worked on one Monteverdi piece in this series. And so Monteverdi's preferred, I think, continuo ensemble, certainly for some of this music, would be organo di legno e chitarrone. So e chitarrone. So you'd have the big lute and the organ playing. So I'm like an even bigger lute with the organ. So that's a very nice combination to have plucked and sustained. But then you have all these wonderful sackbuts and cornets playing on top, and we'll see that in the recording. We'll see Gawain and other people playing their these wonderful linear melodic instruments that give support to the vocal line, if you like. So the singers provide the consonants, but the wind instruments provide the vowels and some colour along the way.
That's right. I think the singers find that singing with these instruments, Kieran, you might have a comment on this, it's like you have another voice with you. They have a way of sounding like a voice.
It's obviously a completely unique sort of skill and style of playing these wonderful instruments. It makes me think in a very different way as a singer when we sing this kind of chamber music. You often speak to us when we're singing live, maybe not necessarily on a Zoom call, but about singing within the sound. So it's finding a way to sort of you've got this the continuous sound underneath, and as singers we normally sort of think of ourselves as layers: bass, tenor, alto, soprano. But whenever there's one instrument playing your voice type with a slightly different timbre, you almost have to just sort of get yourself inside that, and it makes you think about your own sound and your own blend, not only then with the singers around you, but the band that you're playing with. It really enhances your aural awareness as an ensemble singer at times, I think.
And doesn't it also provide the perfect sort of context for figuring out how you should sing this music? So obviously, if you're bellowing, if you've got a huge production, so much that you can't even really hear the instruments, then you're probably, if your interest is to do it in some sort of historically informed way, you're on the wrong track if you're really taking over. So as Mark says, if you can try and fit into that world, it gives you these lovely parameters of plausibility as to how the music might be performed, I think.
Parameter of plausibility. I like that line. It's a good one. It's exactly that.
Well, plausibility is my thing, because I suppose for my sins, I'm constantly finishing off this PhD that I've been doing for years, but I'm really in the last stretches of it. But the idea is that you can't really recreate the past, but you could have a plausible look at what might be possible to do that's within some sort of parameters. So I think plausibility is a very useful word.
Yes, indeed. I think one of the things that is so interesting for singers in this music working with instruments is developing a different idea of how voices might have sounded in the time of Schütz, because they certainly didn't sound like the modern SATB choir, which has filtered through the whole 19th century bel canto technique and the way people tend to sing now, the way we tend to think of the ideal vocal sound, the ideal choral sound. I think it's opening the door to a very different idea of what a choir is and how the voice can be used, both in terms of not just the timbre or the quality, but things like tuning, where you put the notes, actually, where you position them, and how you shape the phrase, how you shape long notes. When you have an instrument doing this in a very sort of natural, expressive way, then the voices can so easily imitate. It's such a revelation, I think, when you
and it also fits with the lines that Schütz composes for this text, because obviously it's a very attractive text to set this psalm, because of course it talks about the timpano, the coro, the salterio. So you have the drum, you have the dance, you have the salterio, whatever that is, a lyre or a harp. So you're praising the Lord with all these instruments. But then he gives us these beautiful melismatic lines where you're painting the singing. When we're I suppose very shortly going to hear this piece, and so if you listen to how he paints cantate, how does he paint the word sing? Beautiful lines, and of course the wind instruments, the sackbuts and cornets up there, are also doing it all fits together in a very logical kind of way.
Absolutely, it's one of his most concise pieces. It's just in 4 parts. In a way very minimal, and yet there is so much packed into this, just like Eoghan's piece. It's a remarkable sort of
exactly
concise. Everything is there where it should be. It has a wonderfully complete and satisfying feeling, I find. So without further ado, I think we might listen to our performance by Resurgam Connects of Heinrich Schütz's Cantate Domino. Great. Oh, there we are.
Are we on our own again?
I think we're still live. We are, yes. So that was Heinrich Schütz, Cantate Domino. Kieran, I was delighted to see Kate McAvoy's timbrel featured there. That was really perfectly placed. So what with that and Siobhan's harp, we had, and of course seeing the other instruments as well, we had that added pictorial enhancement of the text, which was great to see. I should tell everyone that the two recordings can be viewed later on. If you didn't catch them now or you want to pass the links on to other people, they'll be on the Resurgam YouTube channel. So you can get to that via resurgam.ie. I would like to say a huge word of thanks to our Resurgam Connects singers. I don't know about you, Kieran, but I noticed quite a difference between this project and the last in terms of how people are engaging. That sense of really singing through the camera, through the screen and being present. Fantastic eye contact and in every sense a proper choir, even though it's online. So to all you singers, and I hope you're all watching, jolly well done. Really good work. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Kieran and Siobhan, thanks very much for being with us. Great to have you with us.
You're very welcome.
And here's to the next one. Though hopefully we'll be able to do this live very, very soon. Okay, folks, so thanks so much for joining us this afternoon, to our singers, to those who are listening in to hear the choir, to our Resurgam singers, English cornet and sackbut ensemble, and to Siobhan on the harp. Thank you all very much indeed, and have a great evening.